Hello and welcome to the About to Interview podcast. I'm your host, that guy named John. This is a supplemental version of the About to Review podcast, which drops every Wednesday and covers movies, TV shows, film festivals, and more. You can follow the podcast on all forms of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at About to Review, and make sure to subscribe on iTunes/Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Blueberry, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. This show focuses solely on the conversations that I have with authors, directors, actors, and creators, and is available on YouTube as well as subscribing to the podcast. Make sure to click the subscribe button below, give a thumbs up, and check out the full show notes with links to the guests at abouttoreview.com. Joining me now is the one and only, the man, the myth, the voice. He is an actor, a stand-up comedian, voiceover legend, improv master, and so much more. Welcome to the show. Very happy to have you, Mr. Phil LaMarr.
Thank you, John. Although I do have to, just for the record, since this will be put onto gold records and sent into space with Voyager, correct you. I have not done stand-up. I do not do stand-up. I'm deathly afraid of stand-up.
Oh, right.
I am an improviser, and I've done sketch, so I guess I'm a sketch comedian. It's funny, because a lot of times people will just lump all comedy in together. Like, oh, I saw you on that sitcom. You funny. You should come do some of your comedy. Like, do you have a set and costumes? Because that's the kind of comedy I do.
Right.
But yeah, and I mean, stand-up comics, I have a lot of friends who do stand-up. I mean, that is a craft. That is something wholly unto itself. Improv is theater. It's group theater, but it's, and again, I know a handful of people who can do, stand-up, sketch, and improv, but they're very few and far between.
Gotcha. So I do apologize for lumping you into that category, but, you deserve it because you are incredible in everything that you do. So especially my pedanticness. Right. So for anybody listening who, for whatever reason, has been living under a rock for the past, let's say 20-some-odd, 30-some-odd years, you might know Phil LaMarr from such things as a little TV show that was huge in the 90s called MADtv. And then, of course, right. I am not even going to attempt to list your voiceover work, but projects like Justice League, where you played Green Lantern, which was incredible. Things like Samurai Jack, one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Right. Futurama, and just...
There you go.
Yeah. If you go to Phil LaMarr's IMDb page, which I will link in the show notes, just peruse through the over 350 acting credits. Wow. So, yeah, that is insane.
It adds up over time.
Yeah. So, one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about is when we were growing up, the term that is very popular right now, the term blurred or black nerd, did not exist. Any of us who were brown, black, mixed, we were the outliers of the outliers when it came to geek culture. So what was it like for you to navigate through those situations before being a black nerd was cool?
You mean before being a black nerd, like, in a social context, it didn't exist.
Right.
I mean, and the weird thing about it was, you were basically just sort of a nerd. There was, without the internet, the subsection of person of color within the realm of whatever kind of nerddom you would have been in was so small that it really didn't bear categorization, So in that respect, in most respects, it wasn't an issue in the sense that it wasn't acknowledged.
Right.
It wasn't like anybody was saying, "Hey, black guy, you can't come in our comic book store." But the problem that it held at the time was there was no thought to, fan service for minorities within a geekdom.
Right.
And to a large extent, there still aren't. I mean, comic books are one of the few industries that is addressing it. I mean, geek industries, I mean.
Right.
And I think that's largely because of the mainstreaming of comic books. But you still don't hear a lot about, brothers who love Tolkien,
Right.
it's still not a thing. Although I guess really these days, the only time it comes up is, again, when things get mainstreamed. When Hunger Games, the character that's described in the book, is put on screen as a person of color. Then all of a sudden people are like, what? What's going on? But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, because I've been a comic book reader since way back in the day. And I played D&D. What else? Read science fiction. I mean, we were always aware of it. There's the famous story of Nichelle Nichols and Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
You've heard that one, right? Where he told her she needed to stay on the show.
Yeah. Because we need to be able to see that there were people of color in the future. And that was something that before that it was like, no, by then we have dealt with that situation. As opposed to being like, no, we need to see representation, both not only of a person of color, but a woman of color in space.
Right.
And because of, her...
And not cleaning.
Right. She was not the space janitor.
If you look at those 50s movies, 50 science fiction of the future, ain't nobody. Klaatu Nick Barakta or whatever, that was the only African in that entire world.
Right.
Was whatever that alien was saying.
Right. Yeah, and it just, when you get people like Nichelle Nichols having that representation, then in the real world, you have Dr. Mae Jameson, who became the first African-American woman in space because she grew up seeing an African-American woman in space.
Right. Although it's funny because it's kind of a wonder that any black people grew up to make comics, of my generation, because all you had were the blacks.
Yep.
Like all the characters who had black in their name.
Yep. There was always that qualifier. Black Lightning. Black Panther.
Black Goliath.
Black Racer.
Right.
Yeah, as if comic books are not in color and they could not see that. They're like, no, we need to make sure nobody has any questions. Like, no, this is Black Racer. Like,
right.
Cool. I can see that. Thanks, guys.
Although, I once heard a really funny story. I met Neil Adams at a convention, and I went up to introduce myself to him. And I introduced him saying, I've done the voice of a character that you helped create, Jon Stewart.
Absolutely.
And he said, and he went on to tell me the story of how he had to fight to get Jon Stewart's name. Like, he had pushback on the name.
What?
It's not a black name, Neil.
Oh.
They wanted something like Lincoln Jefferson or some kind of, thing like that. And what was the other thing? Oh, this was the thing that really, really cracked me up. He got pushback on his color. Because they send in the color. He drew the artwork in black and white, and then he did the codes for how he wanted it colored. And apparently, at that time, the colors they had for what we now call African Americans was this sort of grayish tone.
Great.
And when he said that, I kind of remembered, like, oh yeah, like there was like a Sergeant Rock and there was a black soldier, and he did not look like a healthy brown.
Looked like stone.
Right. And and Neil's like, okay, I'm going to make my black character look like a black man. And he put, like a healthy brown. And they're like, no, 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 no. You can't color him brown. People will be insulted.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I'm glad that we were able to move past that. But I can definitely see, because I came in to that, modern age of comics, the Bronze Age of comics in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
When at least there started to be more of it. And, without those qualifiers. Seeing Bishop, for the first time in the X-Men.
Yeah.
Like, that was incredible. And then going through and finding, once I started collecting and seeing Blade, and Tomb of Dracula.
Right.
So, yeah, it is incredible the steps that we have taken. And it is also incredible the steps that we still need to take.
Well, it's funny because I've been involved with the Dwayne McDuffie Award for Diversity in Comics.
Awesome.
Since its inception. And the motto of the award, and this is something Dwayne wrote, was from invisibility to inevitability.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely possible, but it takes time. It's incremental, that sort of change. And it's about normalization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a step toward it. The fact that Blade was not Black Van Helsing.
Right.
He was Blade.
Mm-hmm.
And Bishop wasn't like, as part of the Black Mutants.
The Black delegation of mutants has chosen Bishop.
Right. And it grew out of, I believe, the generation before had no experience with it. They were writing things they didn't know.
Yeah.
And it was like translating from into a second language. But, the people that you grew up reading in the 80s were people who knew black people.
Imagine that.
There still probably weren't that many of them in the Marvel and DC offices, but there were now a couple. Mm-hmm. Back when Stan and Jack were there, I guarantee you there wasn't anybody.
Yeah, not so much. But going back to kind of your roots and your geek roots. So you mentioned earlier that you played Dungeons and Dragons, which I recently got into. Only in the past few years, it was the one avenue of geekdom that I had not gone down, mainly because I knew that once I started, I would fall into that rabbit hole deep.
Yeah, it's pretty time consuming.
And yeah, now I play every week. I work on my character. I've developed multiple characters. It gets kind of crazy. But do you remember the first time you played Dungeons and Dragons, and what was that experience like?
I was playing back in, because I grew up in the San Fernando Valley from like 4th grade on. Before that, I was out in Inglewood, and in neither of those places was geekdom terribly strong. It wasn't until I got into 7th grade at a private school that I found other nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I remember we used to have like, a pretty regular game for a while until everybody hit puberty and found girls. And then it sort of fell by the wayside. My first character who survived long enough to, get to a level that I still remember was a fighter named Balthazar.
Okay.
I don't remember where that name came from. I'm sure it came from like my science fiction fantasy reading. I had all the Conan books, all of that stuff. The Elric of, I still don't know how to pronounce Melnibone.
Yeah, that is another one of those things where, similar, I talked about Hunger Games. When Harry Potter first came out, and people were like, Hermione, that is how you say it. Because in the books, it was like Hermione. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Right. Well, and that was the thing is, you very rarely had anybody to talk about it with. Right. So you just read the words in the book, and you just guessed,
Pretty much.
It's Namor, the Submariner?
Question mark? Yeah.
Or is it Namor, the Submariner? Well, I don't know. Let's ask Magneto?
Right.
But now there are, mainstream pronunciation guides everywhere. It's Magneto, which is weird. You don't pick up things with a magnet. But no, it's actually fun to see this resurgence of Dungeons and Dragons. And it's actually great because I'm now getting back into that nerddom myself with the project I'm working on currently. It's actually just pretty close to launching. I'm working on an animated series set in a Dungeons and Dragons world.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, is it set in like the Forgotten Realms or something different?
Something different.
Okay.
It's basically it's based on a webcomic that my friend Terrell Hunt has been doing for maybe 11 years called Goblins.
Okay.
And the premise is, those goblins, those little low-level, monsters that you just mow down to get some experience so you can go to the big dungeon. Terrell's premise was, well, what if the goblins got tired of getting their asses handed to them and said, well, why don't we become an adventuring party and gain some experience and get some treasure and some weapons so we can defend ourselves? And so the adventuring party is just goblins.
Okay. Now that sounds, you did an episode of Critical Role a while ago where all of you guys played goblins. Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think Matt was aware of Goblins the webcomic, but obviously that was, just sort of taking that spin on it just for a short time. But Terrell has been doing this and taken it into and built this amazing world, where there are humans and there are monsters, but it's from the monster's perspective. So in the human world, it's like, oh, so-and-so, the goblin killer. Like, he's the bad guy in our world.
Yeah.
Like, he's a paladin. He's, ready to destroy all evil. Run! Here he comes! And so we've taken this world that Terrell has built, and my friend Matt King and I have adapted it into an animated series. And we've got some of my friends and co-workers from previous animation stuff that are going to be lending voices to these characters. And we're really excited about it. We're really excited.
And I noticed how carefully you danced around, people from other projects, making sure not to name names. I see what you did. I'm not that new to this.
Well, because we're actually going to be doing a big launch thing, and so I want to save the surprise.
Gotcha. Now, do you have a date for this big launch thing so far? I know animation, of course, takes a long time.
Yeah. We're hoping actually to get it out. Well, to announce everything the beginning of next month.
Okay.
So the beginning of September 2017, depending on when this posts.
This will be posting next week. So.
Oh, great.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
Excellent. And one of the things that I have learned while we were talking about, D&D and our experiences, one of the things that I have learned while playing recently is that games like that, role-playing games, whether it is Pathfinder, or D&D, really lend itself to becoming more creative, not just within the game itself, but outside of gaming, because it just gives you something different to do. How do you think that helped you with your improv that you ended up doing?
It's funny because it was, way before I ever did improv, but it is that same sort of thing. It's taking the love of imagination that you get from reading comics, reading science fiction, all of that stuff, most geekery, but making it active instead of passive. And so I think it was definitely, certainly a stepping stone toward performing, because this was long before I began performing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you say long before, because you said you started about 7th grade, but in high school is when you got your first voice acting gig on the, shall we say, amazing, ? Incredible, ? 1983 cartoon of Mr. T, where you played Woody.
Yep.
So,
it was...
Tell me about that experience.
It was a great summer job.
So it was only one summer?
Well, no, 3 summers, actually.
Oh, okay. I was like, I thought it went on for longer.
Yeah, we did 3 seasons, and they had decided to use real kids, but to, sort of mitigate the time involved in that, they only recorded us in the summer when we weren't on school, because if you record during a school year, then they have to get a studio teacher, and part of the time the kids are there, they have to be actually in school.
Gotcha.
And they're like, we try to make a cartoon. We're not trying to get involved in all of that.
This is not Shakespeare. Like, no. Mm-mm.
Right. It's like, we want you here for 4 hours, that's it.
Interesting. What was it like then to go back to school in the fall and be like, oh, how was your summer? I just recorded a Mr. T cartoon, because at that point in 1983, Mr. T was the biggest name on the planet.
Yeah, but...
Oh, here it comes.
Well, the problem is, I think I was 16 or 17 when we first did the first season. Mm-hmm. And most of my 16 and 17-year-old peers were not watching cartoons on Saturday morning anymore.
Fair point. Fair point.
So it had absolutely no social juice whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the best thing about it was it gave me spending money.
Okay.
I could afford to go to the movies and buy gas and do all that stuff because I had that job during the summer, and it, $3,000, for a 17-year-old kid in 1983, that was good money.
Yeah, you could definitely say that. That 1983 especially, but even now, $3,000 for a summer job, nothing to shy at.
No, it was great.
So from then to now, as far as I know, you still have not met Mr. T, have you?
Nope.
How do we remedy that? That is a crime.
I know, isn't it weird? I keep thinking that at some point I gotta just at least cross paths with him.
Right.
Just has never... I've met Mike Tyson and still not met Mr. T.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Okay. So when you were in high school already, a working actor, you're going to a private school, and you're, kind of deep into your nerddom, even though, yes, girls started to get noticed. And there's this term that those of us, who grew up in certain situations have dealt with called code switching. And where you kind of have to play a different role, as it were, and different manner of speaking. How did that affect you at that point, and do you think it has kind of carried through into your professional life?
Well, what's funny? Again, another term that didn't exist.
True.
Although the thing certainly existed.
Well, yeah.
And I think for the generation before me, it had a different name. It was called survival.
Very true. Yep.
Because, speaking specifically as a black man, you had to act a certain way in certain situations, in order to survive. Now, in my generation, it was less fraught. And I think, in later generations, it's gotten, so lackadaisical, we can put sociology names on it. It's called code switching. But yeah, it's always been a part of my life. I think most people who grow up as minorities, because as a minority, you speak the language of your culture, ethnicity, situation, whatever it is, and you have to learn to speak that of the majority. Because, that's where you live.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that I think for, African Americans growing up in America, you learn it, and you learn to resent it or not resent it, or use it or not use it, but everybody can do it. It's the Richard Pryor, I can do the white guy,
Right.
And it definitely, as if you become a performer, that skill of speaking 2 languages, definitely helps. And for me, it manifested in, when I was pursuing acting, because I would look at a role and decide, okay, who is this guy? What situation is he in? And how is he going to present himself? Because that's what code switching is about. Mm-hmm. How do I present myself in this situation as opposed to that one? If I walk into a room full of brothers, like, yo, what's up? Hey, what's going on?
Right.
If you walk into a room full of, just white guys, like, yo, bro, what's happening, man? Hey, mm-hmm. Or if every situation can potentially have a different face for you to put on. Mm-hmm. And as an actor, I relish that. Almost too much.
Really?
It got to the point. Yeah, it got to the point where sometimes they would say, "Just be yourself." Wait, which one?
Yeah.
You mean myself that I am in a room full of white producers, or the myself that I would be, as this character? It's like, be myself. That doesn't help me. You got to give me something more.
Which I would have to think, especially with. I mean, when you look at actors who are always doing projects, that is one thing. Doing voice acting, I think, would make it particularly difficult for you to then find your own personal voice. Because, again, in that same situation, when they're like, just be more of you, when you have been hundreds of different voices and different characters over 30 years.
Right. Well, but it's interesting because in both on camera and voice acting, there are two sort of paths you can go down. For me, like looking at actors, I look at somebody like Tom Cruise.
Okay.
Tom Cruise is always basically playing Tom Cruise.
Yep. He runs a lot and does his own stunts.
Yeah, but it's Tom Cruise as a lawyer, it's Tom Cruise as a spy, it's Tom Cruise as a pilot. It's always Tom Cruise. Mm-hmm. But then you look at somebody like Robert Duvall, who disappears into a character. Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now is unrecognizable from Robert Duvall in The Godfather.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't know, you can totally be, excused for thinking those are two different people. Mm-hmm. And in voiceover, there's a similar sort of thing. Like there's, those of us who are utility people. We do a lot of different sounding voices that are very different from each other. Then there's what they call the signature read. Okay. Now you get that more in announcers. The biggest one is Don LaFontaine. He was the guy who,
rest in peace.
In a world, Don had one voice, one read,
right.
and it did very well for him.
Extremely well. Yeah.
And in animation, you even have some of that. You have, your Tara Strongs, who is always something different. And then you have your Cree Summer, who can play 109 different characters, but they all sound the same. They all have that same essential Creeness to them. Mm-hmm. She's got a very distinct texture, But, as I learned on Samurai Jack working with Mako, who again... Mako had a very distinct voice and a very distinct way of speaking. But that he didn't let that limit the characters he could play. He could change his angle, his perspective on a character without changing his voice.
Wow.
Which blew my mind. Because I thought, I was doing the vocal equivalent of changing wigs all the time. No, I put on a red wig and I'm a different guy.
Right.
Like, no.
The Groucho Marx sunglasses and nose,
Right. And I realized, I don't have to change my tone as much as I have to change my undertone. Because I saw him do that. I saw him play characters other than Aku with the same voice, but he came at them from a completely different angle. And it sounded like a different character. And Cree does the exact same thing. Even though she's got that very recognizable voice, she's got hundreds of characters that are all distinct.
With the field that you went in and have been extremely successful in, what were those voices that you remember from your childhood?
Oh, well, it's, first and foremost is Mel Blanc, who I was fortunate enough to get to see work, before he passed away. When I was a kid, I went to a recording of a Captain Caveman session.
Wow.
Where he was playing Captain Caveman. And, I got to see him in the room. But, I mean, the characters that he did, and he's another example. I mean, I didn't find this out until many, many years later when Warner Brothers was auditioning for new Looney Tunes voices. And they sent out a CD of examples of Mel doing the voices. And Daffy and Sylvester are the same voice.
Daffy and Sylvester?
But Daffy is sped up.
Oh, okay.
Because you've got, Daffy is up here. Sylvester's down here. But it's the same lisp, but they both have completely different attitudes.
Huh.
So you don't hear the fact that vocally all he's doing is pitching one slightly higher. Because Sylvester's got a completely different attitude than Daffy, who's, woo. And again, it was not the voice, but the acting,
Okay. So Mel Blanc definitely, and anybody, again, we talked about IMDb. If you go on IMDb, look at Mel Blanc's work, he was all over the place.
For 30, 40 years. Although, the other thing was, when I was a kid watching cartoons, he was the only voice actor you knew.
Yeah.
Because there was no internet, and there were rarely any credits.
Oh, that is true.
So, like, all of these guys that I learned later, the Don Messick's, the Dawes Butlers, you had to dig deep, to find out who they were. And to this day, I still don't know what any of them look like.
Right.
All those guys who peopled those thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours of Hanna-Barbera cartoons are still largely anonymous to this day.
That is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Huh. I just think, Wacky Racers.
Right.
All of those.
Paul Frees, all those guys, yeah.
Snidely Whiplash.
Right.
So with animation in particular, because, I grew up watching you on MADtv.
Oh, cool.
And, again, it was just, even in that comedy space, because at the time when MADtv came out, it came out at, I think, one of the best times for that type of show, because at that same time, you had In Living Color that was starting, you had MADtv, SNL, like, there was just such an influx at that time.
Now, be careful, because this is the problem of the internet, is it collapses time.
Okay.
Because, an old Macklemore song is found from the same touch of the button as a Caruso recording. That doesn't mean they existed in the same time period.
Right.
In Living Color was off the air for about 3 or 4 years before MADtv came on.
Oh, right, because MADtv was 95, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think In Living Color might have gone off. Well, maybe it was only 3 years. I think they went down in 92.
Okay.
But SNL, of course, still going to this day. But SNL had been around. I'm trying to think if there was any other. Well, there had been a couple of primetime sketch shows. One, The Edge, was on right before MADtv, starring, weirdly enough, Tom Kenny, his wife Jill Talley, and a young Jennifer Aniston.
What? Oh, I think I remember seeing clips of that show, but I don't think I have ever seen an episode.
No, nobody did. That's why it was off the air.
Well, fair point.
And of course, Tracy Ullman.
Right.
That had been in the early 80s. Actually, that was probably around the time of In Living Color.
Okay. So that was when, I first started seeing that type of show, because even as a kid, I kind of knew what Saturday Night Live was, but I there was no way my parents were letting me stay up, that late. But I always it was so ingrained in just popular culture.
Right.
So then when things like In Living Color came out, and again, it was about representation, it was like, whoa, hold on. There is not just one person of color. There are 6 of them. And wait, they're all related? What is happening? What is this show?
Yeah, and it was pretty groundbreaking at the time. Although that groundbreaking was made possible by this weird thing that they had back in the day. Like, basically, if you were going to launch a channel,
mm-hmm.
you put on a bunch of black shows. Because, I mean, this was the pre-internet model for launching. Because black people watch more TV than white people.
Interesting.
Like per capita.
Yeah.
So the quickest way to get an audience was to put black people on screen. Then you establish yourself, start putting in some white shows, and then eventually get your white audience and kill the black shows. Fox did it. UPN did it. And now, of course, TV has broken down into such small segments that model is gone now. Because, like, well, I'm not going to, aim for a black audience. Nobody aims for a starter audience anymore.
Right.
Now you just go straight to your target. Because we're only going to get, 1 million, 2 million people anyway. So let's put on, cosplay heroes.
Right. And target your very, very specific audience in a very specific way and just go with it, as opposed to kind of that shotgun approach.
Right.
That you were talking about kind of in that 90s, because it was Malik Yoba in like New York Undercover.
Right.
Back then. So it was just, again, we were seeing a lot of representation, but I guess I'd never thought about it in that way that you described it. It was like, there was a reason that all of these shows that had a bunch of diversity were on around the same time on the same network.
Rightio. New York Undercover. That's great. And it's funny because you wonder, like, well, why wasn't a New York Undercover on NBC? Because they didn't need it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I think at that point, Homicide, Life on the Street was going on NBC. Mm-hmm. So
well, and that's where you actually began to see, because people always complain about diversity and how there's not enough change. And I remember as a young actor, I came back to LA in the late 80s to pursue my career, and I watched it change from me going out for parts to play gang members. Because, I mean, in 1988, that's what I was auditioning for. Because that's what there was.
Yeah.
To a point where, what you have now, where if there is any group of people, more than 3 that aren't, blood relations, and maybe sometimes if they are, you have to have at least one black person.
Right.
Or a person of, actually now it's expanded to you have to have at least a person of some color. Mm-hmm. It's like, it looks weird if you don't. Mm-hmm. Like Friends was the last of that breed.
Yeah, and that will be held as the example for a long time. Like, okay, they live in New York City. How is it that Aisha Taylor did not show up until season 6? Right,
exactly. Well, they lived in what do they call it? The Allen Heights.
Right.
The Woody Allen part of New York.
Mm-hmm. Where suddenly, this camera is going to get a person of color. Nope, go over here. Nope.
Right. Unless somebody's delivering Chinese food, you're not seeing anybody of color.
Right. And then it sounds like when you came back to LA and you were seeing that change, because one of the people also that I think of who was pioneering that change and really trying to was Robert Townsend.
Yes.
And he was somebody where, growing up as a comics kid in the 80s and 90s, looking through comics and the ads for Meteor Man, you look at Meteor Man and the cast of that, and you were like, this has every black actor, and they were in one movie. Like, that was crazy.
Right?
So, yeah, he jokes about it in one of his, it was Hollywood Shuffle, when he talks about going to auditions And that same type of process that they were talking about, like, we just need you to be more this. And,
right.
And him trying to kind of figure out, what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, he really did break through in a great way. And, I mean, it's funny because, again, diversity wasn't a buzzword then, but that's what it was about.
Yeah.
But when Robert broke through, it was taking projects focused on people of color out of the ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I mean that figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
Figuratively in the sense that, blaxploitation movies in the 70s were targeted at black audiences. But they were not considered on par with mainstream.
Right.
It was ghetto money.
Mm-hmm.
This was just something that studios would do on the side. He moved it to mainstream. It's like, no, there is an audience out there, for this material. And it's black, and it might also be white, and without having to water it down or change it. And I think actually that Robert was, coming off of the success of like Richard Pryor, because Richard, went mainstream, but stayed, for lack of a better term, black.
Yeah. No, that definitely, that rings true. So other than kind of those models and you getting back into the business and then obviously getting into the animation world, which just blew up and all of your work started going everywhere, because animation, like we already talked about, takes so long to finish, from storyboards to then voice acting to then animation itself. With a show like Samurai Jack, which again is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. It was one of the most stylistically inventive shows. When you were first recording for Samurai Jack, what type of storyboards did you see? And then what was your reaction once you actually saw a completed episode or a completed scene?
Well, actually, I was fortunate enough when we came in to start recording the first episode, Gendy already had some finished animation.
Oh, wow.
He had done this thing that was basically sort of a proof of concept kind of thing.
Okay.
To show the network, what he was talking about, because what he had planned to do was so different from anything that had come before. So he had what was basically the BeetleBot fight.
Okay.
From the first
first kind of movie that they did.
Yeah, yeah, those first 3 episodes, and he had animated that just to show us, a sense of the style and the level of action that he was intending.
So that had to be rare for you, because again, coming from the animation world, you do not get to see the animation until much later.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see any animation until usually a year after you've been working on it.
Jeez.
And it's really it's tough in a lot of ways, because the character isn't complete until it's animated. So, I've been going down this one road, vocally or emotionally or whatever, and it's not until I see what, the animators are doing with their part of the acting that I really get a sense of who the character is as a whole. And seeing it changes my performance, definitely.
Yeah.
But with Samurai Jack, it was great because seeing that made clear what he was talking about in terms of style. And there was a lot of it, again, it was so unique that I think it would have been hard for him to describe.
Right.
And even then, a lot of it was just trust. Like, okay, you tell me how to say it, and in a year and a half, I'll see what you were talking about.
And we will go from there.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that was the way we worked back then and on this new season. I mean, I trust Gendy and his vision implicitly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, every once in a while you have an idea about, you know, something that feels a certain way. It's like, maybe there's... And most of the time he's completely open. It's like, oh yeah, let's try that. But then there are other times he'll say like, well, actually, there's going to be this thing. Just trust me. I know you want to yell it. Just make it quiet. Like, okay. And he's always right.
Awesome. That has to be amazing to then work with the director for so long, who just you trust and they trust you with the material and with the performance to just let it happen organically. You have talked about your love of literature and just being a huge bookworm from an early age. If you could choose a literary character in an animation story, in an animation movie or project, who would that character be?
I don't know. It's funny because so many of them have been done, you know,
right?
Sherlock Holmes. I mean, I think I would like to see a John Buscema Conan the Barbarian, like, in motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's the one that comes to mind.
Conan? Because I know that, I mean, you had talked about that before, where you used to have all of those old books, those beautiful Frank Vegeta art on it. So that would be, okay, that is a good pull. I like it, and I would definitely love to see that. And then, I will not ask what your favorite project is, because that is impossible, especially when you have over 350 acting credits. But what do you think is the project that changed you the most?
Probably MADtv.
Okay.
Because that was the one that first gave me a taste of regular work.
Right.
And gave, because at least for that period of 5 years, I got to stop hustling as much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because most of the time as a performer, as an actor, you know, your job is not acting. Your job is to try to get acting work.
Interesting. You know? Okay.
The acting work is the reward you get for, you know, doing your job.
Right.
And, you know, having that space at MAD for those years, even though we were never a hit and it was never super secure, for a while there, I got to relax and breathe and just sort of dig into myself as a performer and figure out, you know, how I performed, you know, because it wasn't just figuring out how to be a guest on this sitcom and then jump over to how to be, you know, a guest in this person's world. Mm-hmm. You know, I got to be home for a minute and go, okay, this is what I like. This is a process that works for me. And I think from that point on, how I approached my work was different, you know?
Excellent. Okay. And to some of your current work, some of your current projects, you are still doing the improv troupe, the Black version, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And that is that a weekly show? I forget.
No, it's monthly.
Monthly, okay.
We do it here in LA. It's, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a cast of all African-American improvisers. We take a suggestion from the audience of a classic or iconic movie, and then we improvise the quote-unquote black version of that movie. You know, like the black version of Jaws was Catfish, you know.
Wow. Awesome.
You know, the black version of Mary Poppins was Rashida Popoff, you know.
Amazing.
So it's so much fun.
Awesome. And then I definitely am looking forward to whatever that future project is, whatever it is called, the Dungeons and Dragons animation.
It's called Goblins Animated.
Oh, Goblins Animated. Okay. I was not sure if that was the official title or if that was just kind of so Goblins Animated. Excellent.
Yeah, no, that's the official title. Just the rest of the details are to come.
Okay. Excellent. Well, maybe, you know, a couple months down the road, few months down the road, we can do a follow-up and see what the project is.
Certainly.
Fantastic.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And then where can people find you on social media and get kind of the most up-to-date information of all of the projects that you work on?
I'm most active on Twitter at Phil LaMarr. And it's my name, all one word, but 2 L's in the middle, 2 R's on the end. And I also have my Facebook page that I keep pretty up to date, and my webpage, PhilLaMarr.com, that always has information about, upcoming shows, appearances, etc.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, again, as a lifelong, pretty much actually lifelong fan, because I grew up watching you and then seeing you in Justice League, seeing you in Samurai Jack. I actually used to, because it was right around when TiVo first came out, but I had no money for a TiVo. I used to take VHS and record Samurai Jack.
Oh, no way.
Keep in mind, I was not a child. I had already moved out of my parents' home. But as soon as I saw the trailer for Adult Swim and all these things, I was like, this is happening. So I used to record it. And so to be able to sit here and talk to you is pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you, John. That's very nice of you, man.
So thank you again for coming on here. I will put all of the links to your social media in the show notes. So,
great.
Once again, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining the show, Phil LaMarr.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the About to Interview podcast, which is an About to Review production. Make sure to click the subscribe button below, give a thumbs up, and check out the full show notes with links to the guests below, as well as on the website abouttoreview.com. Thank you to my amazing guests, and also thank you to Vexing Media, who provides audio and video editing services for this podcast. They are a graphic design, website design, and digital media company. You can find all of their work at vexingmedia.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter at Vexing Media. Make sure to follow the podcast on all forms of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at About to Review, and subscribe to the podcast About to Review, which comes out every Wednesday.